Isla Vex moved like water through the crowded laboratory, her iridescent blue skin catching the artificial light as she expertly navigated around the human scientists with practiced precision. 6 months at Outpost Horizon, and not once had she allowed herself within arm's reach of Lieutenant Darius Thorne. The moment his broad-shouldered frame appeared in the doorway, she gathered her research tablets and slipped through the opposite exit. "She's done it again," Darius muttered to Dr. Patel, watching the Aloran scientist's hasty departure. "Am I that repulsive to alien biology?" Dr. Patel chuckled, adjusting her spectacles. "Don't take it personally. Isla avoids all humans, but you seem to trigger her escape protocol faster than most." Darius frowned, running a hand through his dark curls. In the year since first contact with the Alorans, establishing the joint research outpost had been his primary mission. As liaison between Earth's coalition and the enigmatic aliens, understanding their behavior was literally his job. "Research Pod 7 needs calibration," Dr. Patel said, sliding a security card across the table. "Perhaps you'll have better luck with the machines than with our blue-skinned colleague." The research pods, spherical chambers extending from the outpost's main hub, housed the most sensitive experiments. Darius welcomed the solitude as he entered Pod 7, the door sealing with a soft hiss behind him. The star-filled viewport offered a panoramic view of the gas giant they orbited, its swirling storms a hypnotic dance of amber and crimson. He didn't notice her at first, bent over a quantum interface at the far side of the pod. Isla's slender fingers manipulated holographic symbols in the air, her concentration absolute. When she finally glanced up, the symbol array crashed into digital fragments. "Lieutenant Thorne," she said, her melodic voice tight, "I was not informed anyone would be joining me." "Neither was I," Darius replied, maintaining his distance. "Dr. Patel sent me for calibration work." Isla's luminescent eyes narrowed. The calibration was completed this morning. They stared at each other across the pod, realization dawning simultaneously. "We've been set up," Darius said, a wry smile forming. "Indeed," Isla moved toward the exit, her movements fluid yet hurried. "I shall return later." The pod shuddered suddenly, lights flickering. A computerized voice announced, "Emergency protocols engaged. Exterior hull breach detected. Research Pod 7 sealed for safety containment." Darius rushed to the control panel. "System override, Lieutenant Thorne. Authorization Delta 97. "Override denied. Containment procedures in effect." Isla stood frozen by the sealed door, as far from Darius as the pod allowed. Her breathing quickened, chest rising and falling beneath her silver research uniform. "The system shows a micrometeorite impact," Darius said, scanning readings. "Nothing critical, but they've locked us down until they verify the pod's integrity. Standard procedure." "How long?" Isla's voice was barely audible. 2 hours minimum," he replied, nodding her distress. "Are you claustrophobic?" She shook her head, pressing herself against the wall as he approached the viewport. "Then why do you look terrified to be alone with me?" he asked gently. "Have I offended you somehow?" Isla's gaze met his, vulnerability flickering in her luminescent eyes. "It is not you, Lieutenant. It is what I am." The pod shuddered again, more violently. Warning lights bathed them in crimson as the oxygen recyclers sputtered and died. "That's not supposed to happen," Darius muttered, returning to the console. "Oxygen levels will become critical in 70 minutes. Isla joined him at the console, careful to keep distance between them. The impact must have damaged the primary oxygen system. "We need to activate the backup manually," Darius said, pointing to an access panel near the floor. "But it's a two-person job, one to hold the override switch, one to realign the circulation matrix." Isla's expression tightened. "That would require us to work in close proximity." "Is that such a terrible prospect?" Darius asked, frustration edging his voice. "What exactly are you afraid will happen?" The artificial gravity fluctuated, sending them both stumbling. As the pod tilted, Isla braced herself against the wall, her eyes wide with a fear deeper than their current predicament. "If I touch you," she whispered, "everything changes, and there will be no going back for either of us." Darius steadied himself against the console as the pod's gravity stabilized. "What do you mean, everything changes?" Isla's luminescent eyes darted to the oxygen display. 65 minutes remaining. "We should focus on survival first," she said, moving toward the access panel. "I will explain while we work." Darius nodded, kneeling beside the panel but maintaining the careful distance she seemed to require. He removed the cover, revealing a complex array of crystalline circuits and pooling conduits. "I'll hold the override," he offered, reaching for the recessed switch. "You have the technical expertise for the matrix realignment." Isla positioned herself at the furthest edge of the panel. "My species, the Alorans, we carry a genetic trait that has shaped our civilization for millennia. We call it the soul binding." Her slender fingers danced across the matrix controls, each movement precise yet cautious of his proximity. Despite her alien features, Darius found himself captivated by the graceful curve of her neck, the subtle shifts of color beneath her blue skin. When an Aloran with this trait first makes physical contact with a compatible being, a neurochemical bond forms instantly, she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "It's irreversible, a lifelong connection that links two beings on multiple levels. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, all become shared experiences." Darius watched her work, processing her words. "And you believe I'm compatible?" "All humans are," she replied, adjusting a crystalline node. "When your species arrived, our elders warned those of us with the trait to avoid physical contact unless we were certain. One touch could bind us forever to a stranger." The backup system hummed to life, the warning lights shifting from red to amber. "That's why you've been avoiding me," Darius said, understanding dawning. "You fear being permanently connected to someone you don't know, to me." Isla's eyes met his across the small space between them. "Wouldn't you?" Darius considered this as they replaced the access panel and moved to opposite sides of the pod. The oxygen levels had stabilized, buying them time to wait for rescue. "I don't know," he finally answered. "It sounds invasive, but also profound, to truly know another being, to never be alone again." A flicker of surprise crossed Isla's features. "Most would find the prospect terrifying." "Most haven't spent 3 years on deep space assignments," he countered with a small smile. "Solitude loses its charm eventually." For the first time since he'd known her, Isla laughed, a melodic sound that seemed to shimmer in the air between them. The tension in the pod eased slightly. "So this bond," Darius ventured, "it's not just biological, it has emotional components." Isla settled into a seat, still keeping her distance. "It amplifies what's already there. If there's attraction, it intensifies. If there's animosity, that grows too." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "For compatible pairs with mutual affection, it's considered our highest blessing. And for those without, a prison," she said simply. "That's why I've been careful. It would be unconscionable to force such a connection on someone unwilling." Darius moved to the viewport, watching the gas giant's swirling storms. "I appreciate your consideration, though I'm curious why you feared this specifically with me. You seem to avoid all humans equally." Isla's skin flushed a deeper blue, the equivalent of a human blush. "The compatibility readings are strongest with you. Our medical scanners detected it during your orientation. I was advised to exercise extreme caution." Something warm unfurled in Darius's chest at this revelation. "So we're especially compatible, then?" "Biologically," she clarified quickly, "which means nothing without mutual consent and desire." The pod communication system crackled suddenly. "Lieutenant Thorne, Dr. Vex, this is Control. We're working to extract you, but structural damage is worse than initially reported. Estimate 4 hours until rescue. Please confirm oxygen status." Darius moved to the console. "Backup systems online. We're stable for now." After the transmission ended, silence stretched between them. Darius found himself studying Isla with new awareness, the elegant architecture of her face, the way light played across her skin. She seemed equally unable to look away. 4 hours, he said softly. "Plenty of time to get to know each other better, without touching," he added quickly. Isla's expression softened. "What would you like to know, Lieutenant?" "Darius," he corrected. "And everything, starting with why you became a quantum physicist and ending with whatever made you smile just now." Her lips curved again. "That was you, Darius. You made me smile." As the hours passed, they talked, truly talked for the first time. Isla described the crystalline forests of her homeworld, the musical language of her people, her passion for understanding the universe's fundamental laws. Darius shared stories of Earth, his family's generations of military service, his secret love of ancient poetry. With each revelation, the invisible barrier between them seemed both more crucial and more fragile. Several times, they nearly forgot themselves, Darius reaching to illustrate a point, Isla leaning forward in animated discussion, only to pull back at the last moment, hearts racing. "It's strange," Isla said as they awaited rescue, now sitting closer than they ever had before. "I've feared this scenario for months, yet." "Yet," Darius prompted, voice low. Her luminescent eyes met his, unflinching. "Yet I find myself wondering what it would be like to be bound to someone like you." The rescue team's tools began cutting through the sealed door, but neither Isla nor Darius looked away from each other. "Maybe someday," he said softly, "we won't have to wonder." 2 weeks after their entrapment in the research pod, Isla found herself more confined than ever, not by physical barriers, but by her own evolving emotions. Their near miss had changed everything, yet nothing had changed at all. They still couldn't touch. She still fled rooms when he entered. But now their eyes sought each other across crowded laboratories. Now they lingered in the same spaces, maintaining their careful distance while finding reasons to extend their conversations. Tonight, she watched from the observatory deck as Darius supervised the deployment of new sensor arrays on the outpost's exterior. His space-suited figure moved with practiced efficiency against the backdrop of stars. Despite herself, she imagined the contours of his body beneath the bulky suit, the feel of his hands, fantasies that both thrilled and terrified her. "Quite the view," said Dr. Patel, appearing beside her. Isla startled. "The gas giant storm formations are particularly active tonight." Dr. Patel followed her gaze, not to the swirling planet, but to Darius's distant figure. "Indeed, quite stormy." The scientist's knowing smile made Isla's skin flush deeper blue. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the outpost. "Meteoroid swarm detected," announced the automated system. "All exterior personnel report to emergency stations. Impact imminent." Isla's heart seized as she watched Darius turn toward the outpost. Too slowly, too far from the airlock. "He won't make it inside before impact," she whispered. Without conscious thought, she was running toward the emergency response bay, grabbing a rescue suit, and cycling through the nearest airlock, procedures she'd trained for but never performed. By the time Mission Control realized what she was doing, she was already moving across the outpost's exterior, propulsion jets carrying her toward Darius. The first meteoroid struck the outpost's shields, causing the structure to shudder. Ahead, Darius struggled with a tether that had wrapped around his boot, anchoring him in place. "Isla," his voice crackled through her calm, "get back inside." "Not without you." She reached him just as the meteoroid swarm intensified, fragments penetrating the outpost's outer shields. Something struck her suit's propulsion system, sending her spinning. Darius caught her with one arm, finally freeing himself from the tangle. Together they pushed toward the airlock, meteoroids pinging off their suits with increasing frequency. They were 5 meters from safety when a larger impact sent them tumbling. Isla felt the horrifying sensation of her suit depressurizing, a tear in her glove exposing her hand to vacuum. Pain seared through her as tissues swelled. Blackness edged her vision. Through it, she saw Darius pull her against him, clamping his gloved hand over the tear in hers, using his suit's pressure to stabilize her exposure. They crashed through the airlock together, emergency systems sealing and pressurizing the chamber. As atmosphere returned, Darius released her damaged glove and tore off his helmet. "Med kit," he gasped, reaching for the emergency supplies mounted on the wall. Isla could only stare at her exposed blue hand, the pain receding, replaced by a different sensation. Warmth spreading from her fingertips up her arm, radiating through her chest. "Darius," she whispered, "when you grabbed my exposed hand." He froze, med kit forgotten as understanding dawned. The soul binding had begun. They stared at each other, both breathing heavily. Isla felt it building, the connection forming, neural pathways linking across species barriers. And then the first wave of his emotions crashed into her consciousness. Concern for her injury, fear of what was happening, and underneath something deeper, desire, fascination, a yearning that mirrored her own. Darius gasped, clearly feeling the reciprocal wave of her emotions. Are we?" "Yes," she whispered, "we're binding." The inner airlock door opened, medical personnel rushing in, separating them to treat their injuries. But the damage, or miracle, was done. As they were carried to opposite ends of the medical bay, Isla felt Darius's presence in her mind like a warm current, impossible to ignore. Hours later, after treatments for vacuum exposure and shock, Isla lay in her recovery pod, experiencing the full effects of the bond. When she closed her eyes, she could sense Darius's location in the facility, feel echoes of his physical sensations, the tightness of bandages around his ribs, the cool sheets against his skin. More disconcertingly, she caught fragments of thoughts, not words exactly, but impressions, emotions, desires. The medical bay door slid open. Darius entered, moving directly to her bedside as if drawn by gravity. His eyes, those human eyes she'd spent months avoiding, now held hers with an intensity that made her tremble. "I can feel you," he said softly. "In my mind, my dreams." Isla nodded, unable to look away. "It will intensify for several days before stabilizing." Darius sat carefully on the edge of her bed, close but not touching, though the initial contact had rendered such caution meaningless now. "They're saying you saved my life," he said, "and that you risked everything to do it." "I couldn't watch you die," she replied simply. His hand moved to hover over hers, not quite making contact. A new electricity hummed between them, the bond enhancing every sense, every awareness of each other. "This connection," he whispered, "it amplifies existing feelings, you said, doesn't create them." "Yes." "Then what I'm feeling now, what I've felt since I first saw you, it's real." Isla's breath caught. Through their newfound connection, she sensed the truth in his words, felt the depth of his attraction unobscured by confusion or pity. Without conscious decision, her hand rose to meet his. The second touch was different from the desperate grab in vacuum. As their fingers intertwined, the bond flared between them, a supernova of sensation. She felt his sharp intake of breath as if it were her own, experienced the racing of his heart alongside hers. When his lips finally met hers, the universe collapsed to a single point of perfect understanding. Human and Aloran, different in biology but aligned in desire. His hands traced the contours of her face, each touch sending cascades of shared pleasure through their bond. "I've wanted this," he murmured against her lips, "since the moment you first ran from me." Isla laughed softly, her fingers threading through his dark curls. "I was running from this, from how much I already wanted you." They moved together as if they'd been lovers for centuries, the bond guiding them, each touch amplified by their shared consciousness. When his hand slipped beneath her medical gown, she gasped at the dual sensation, feeling both his touch and his pleasure in touching her. "Is this too much?" he asked, hesitating. Isla answered by pulling him closer, their bodies pressing together, the bond singing between them. "It's everything." The universe beyond their embrace ceased to exist. There was only this perfect union of bodies and minds, this discovery of each other. With each caress, each kiss, the bond strengthened, transforming from alien intrusion to precious gift. When they finally lay entwined, breathless and wonderstruck, Isla felt tears on her cheeks, hers or his, she couldn't tell anymore. "I never imagined," Darius whispered, "that being bound to you would feel like coming home." Isla rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat synchronize with hers. In the morning, they would face questions, protocols, the clash of two civilizations' expectations. But for now, there was only the miracle of their connection, a storm they'd surrendered to together. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Varix declared, his translucent blue skin pulsing with agitation. The elder Aloran glared at Isla across the conference table. "A soul binding with a human without proper validation protocols or familial approvals." Beside her, Darius sat stiffly in his uniform, his controlled expression betraying nothing to the others. Through their bond, however, Isla felt his simmering frustration and protective instincts. "The circumstances were extraordinary," Dr. Quan, the outpost's medical director, interjected. "Lieutenant Thorne would have died without Dr. Vex's intervention." 3 days had passed since the meteoroid incident, 3 days of intensive medical evaluations, diplomatic negotiations, and precious few moments alone together. Their new bond had stabilized into a constant awareness of each other, emotions, physical sensations, occasional flashes of thought. Never intrusive, always intimate. "The binding was accidental," Isla said, though the words felt like a betrayal of what had grown between them. "But it is irreversible." Captain Hernandez, the outpost commander, leaned forward. What exactly does this bond entail? Are there security implications we should be concerned about? Isla felt Darius's spike of indignation through their connection. His hand found hers beneath the table, their fingers intertwining. The bond allows for emotional resonance, some physical awareness and limited intuitive understanding, she explained. Not mind reading or control. Ambassador Verix made a dismissive gesture. That is the simplified explanation for outsiders. The truth is more complex and potentially dangerous. Soul-bound pairs have been known to influence each other profoundly, sometimes prioritizing their bond above all other loyalties. Are you suggesting I would compromise my duties? Darius asked, voice dangerously calm. I am suggesting that neither of you fully understands what you've initiated, Verix replied. Our histories contain examples of ill-matched bindings that drove both parties to madness or worse. A cold fear spread through Isla. Was that possible? Could their bond, something that felt so right, ultimately destroy them? From Darius, she sensed not fear but determination. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a physical reassurance that matched the emotional support flowing through their connection. Captain Hernandez sighed. Until we understand the full implications, I'm reassigning both of you to separate projects. Lieutenant Thorne will coordinate with the Earth delegation. Dr. Vex will work with the Aloran science team in the East Wing. Physical separation won't dissolve the bond, Isla said, anxiety rising. No, Hernandez agreed, but it will give everyone time to assess the situation objectively. As they left the conference room, Ambassador Verix pulled Isla aside, switching to their native language. There is a ritual, he said quietly, mentioned only in our oldest texts, a way to sever a bond if attempted within the first lunar cycle. Isla stared at him, shocked. Such knowledge is forbidden. These are unprecedented times, he replied. The ritual is dangerous, painful for both participants, but it could free you both from this accident of fate. Through their bond, Isla felt Darius's concern spike, though he couldn't understand the Aloran words. She pulled away from the ambassador. I will consider it, she said, though the very thought of severing their connection felt like contemplating amputation. The following weeks tested them in ways neither could have anticipated. Physically separated by work assignments, they found their bond both comfort and torment. During the day, they caught glimpses of each other across crowded rooms, their connection allowing brief moments of shared emotion despite the distance. At night, when the outpost dimmed for sleep cycle, they defied orders to meet in forgotten corridors and empty observation decks. I feel you dreaming, Darius whispered during one such encounter, his body pressed against hers in the narrow confines of a maintenance alcove. Colors I've never seen, music without sound. Isla traced the lines of his face, still marveling at how his alien features had become so precious to her. And I feel your nightmares, planets burning, people screaming, the war you survived. The past, he said, kissing her deeply. Through their bond, his desire flowed into her, igniting her own. Each touch, each kiss was doubly felt, her pleasure and his arousal and hers, entwined in an endless feedback loop of sensation. When they made love in these stolen moments, it transcended physical connection. Their bond flared open completely, consciousness melding until neither knew where one ended and the other began. It was addictive, transcendent, and increasingly difficult to hide. They're watching us, Darius murmured later, as they lay tangled together in her quarters. Monitoring our vital signs, our performance metrics, looking for evidence the bond is compromising us. Isla nestled closer against him, savoring the warmth of his skin against hers. And is it? If they ordered you to leave the outpost, to leave me, what would you do? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither had voiced. Through their connection, she felt his internal struggle, duty warring with newfound devotion. I don't know, he admitted finally. A month ago, the answer would have been simple now. She kissed him softly, understanding. Ambassador Verix told me of a ritual that might sever our bond. Darius stiffened, a surge of panic flowing through their connection. Is that what you want? No, she whispered, but perhaps it is what you need, your career, your future. Me nothing without you, he interrupted, pulling her closer. But if you want your freedom back. Freedom, she laughed softly. I have never felt more free than I do with you in my mind, my heart, my soul. The relief that flowed between them was mutual and profound. Whatever challenges they faced, they would face together. But the following morning, reality intruded harshly. Captain Hernandez summoned them both to her office, her expression grave. "Earth Command has concerns about the security implications of your bond," she said without preamble. "Lieutenant Thorne, you've been reassigned. You're to return to Earth on tomorrow's transport for evaluation." "That's impossible," Darius said, the calm in his voice belied by the storm of emotions Isla felt through their connection. "The bond is precisely why they want you separated," Hernandez interrupted. "The distances involved will provide valuable data on the bond's limitations." Isla felt herself go cold. "You cannot do this. Extended separation during the bond's formative phase could cause psychological damage to both of us." Hernandez's expression softened slightly. "I fought this decision, believe me, but orders are orders." That night, as they clung to each other in desperate embrace, Isla made her decision. "The ritual," she whispered against Darius's chest. "We should attempt it." She felt his shock and hurt pulse through their connection. "You want to break our bond?" "No," she said fiercely, raising herself to look into his eyes. "But if the alternative is watching you be taken from me, suffering in separation, I would rather set you free." Understanding dawned in his expression, accompanied by a wave of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed their bond. "What would this ritual entail?" he asked, voice rough with emotion. "Pain," she said simply. "Physical and psychic trauma to disrupt the neural pathways the bond has formed. There's significant risk to both participants." His hand cradled her face. "And if we refuse, if I defy orders?" "Then we risk everything. Your career, my position, perhaps the entire human-Aloran alliance." They held each other in silence, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on them. Through their bond, thoughts and emotions flowed freely: fear, devotion, desire, determination. "There has to be another way," Darius finally said. "Something neither of our peoples has considered." Isla traced the strong line of his jaw, memorizing him with every sense. "We have until tomorrow's transport to find it." As sleep finally claimed them, their minds remained linked, searching together through dreams and half-formed ideas for a solution that would allow them to keep the precious connection that had become the center of both their worlds. Dawn found them still entwined, their bond humming with purpose. The night's shared dreams had crystallized into clarity. "We won't run," Darius said, watching Isla dress in her formal Aloran robes. "And we won't break the bond." She nodded, determination flowing between them. "We'll prove its value instead." They moved through the outpost with new presence, no longer hiding their connection but embracing it openly. When they entered the command center together, conversation stuttered to silence. "Lieutenant," Captain Hernandez began, eyeing the transport shuttle visible through the viewport, "your departure is scheduled for—" "I'm not leaving," Darius interrupted, his voice carrying through the room. "Not without a chance to demonstrate what this bond truly means." Ambassador Varick stepped forward. "The Council has made its decision." "A decision based on fear, not understanding," Isla countered. She reached for Darius's hand, their fingers intertwining without hesitation. The action drew gasps from the Aloran delegation. Through their bond, they felt each other's courage magnify, creating a feedback loop of strength. This was what the elders feared, and what they had failed to understand. "One demonstration," Darius proposed. "The TL Narian delegation arrives today for the resource-sharing negotiations. Let us act as liaisons." Captain Hernandez frowned. "The TL Narians have been notoriously difficult to communicate with. Their language contains empathic components our translators can't process." "Precisely," Isla said. "Our bond gives us unique capabilities. Darius can perceive emotional nuances I detect from the TL Narians, while I can access his intuitive understanding of military and strategic concerns." The command center fell silent, the proposal hanging in the air. Dr. Quan, who had been monitoring their bond's development, stepped forward. "From a scientific perspective, this could be invaluable data," she offered. "The bond has shown remarkable stability in preliminary tests." Captain Hernandez studied them for a long moment. "One chance. If you fail, Lieutenant Thorne boards that transport without further argument." The hours before the TL Narian arrival passed in tense preparation. While officially briefing for the negotiations, Isla and Darius explored the deeper aspects of their bond, pushing its limits, discovering how to consciously share not just emotions but specific thoughts and sensory impressions. "It's like learning a new language," Darius murmured, his forehead pressed against hers in the privacy of her quarters. "The more we practice, the more fluent we become." Isla's fingers traced patterns on his chest, each touch sending cascades of shared sensation through their connection. The elders never speak of this aspect, how the bond can evolve beyond instinct into conscious cooperation. His lips found hers, the kiss deepening as their connection flared between them. Through the bond, each felt the other's desire, creating an intoxicating spiral of shared passion. Clothes fell away, forgotten, as they moved together on her narrow bed. Their lovemaking had transformed since the bond's formation, no longer just physical union but a merging of consciousness. Each caress, each movement created echoes of pleasure that reverberated between them. When Darius's lips traced the sensitive patterns along her collarbone, Isla gasped at the dual sensation, her pleasure and his satisfaction at causing it, perfectly synchronized. "I feel everything you feel," he whispered against her skin, his hands exploring the unique textures of her body with reverent fascination. "It's incredible." Isla arched beneath him, her luminescent eyes glowing brighter with desire. This is what the bond was meant to be, not a trap, but a gift. When they came together, merging physically as their minds already had, the boundaries between them dissolved completely. For precious moments, they existed as a single consciousness experiencing ecstasy from both perspectives simultaneously, a transcendent connection neither species had imagined possible. Afterward, lying tangled together in the quiet darkness, they refined their strategy for the negotiations. Their bond now felt like a finely tuned instrument they were learning to play together. "Are you afraid?" Isla asked, sensing undercurrents in his emotions. Darius considered the question, knowing she would feel any dishonesty. "Not of the negotiations, but of what happens after if we succeed. Everything will change." She pressed closer, her skin cooling to match his body temperature, an unconscious Aloran adaptation the bond had somehow triggered. Everything already has. When the TL Narian delegation arrived the following day, the outpost hummed with tension. The insectoid species had never successfully negotiated with either humans or Alorans separately, their complex emotional language creating barriers that technology couldn't bridge. Isla and Darius stood together in the diplomatic chamber, her blue hand resting lightly in his. Through their bond, they established a rhythm. She would sense the emotional harmonics in the TL Narian's communication, feeding the impressions to Darius, who translated them into strategic implications and responses. The first hour passed in awkward exchanges. By the second, something remarkable had begun to happen. The TL Narian's antennae quivered with increasing interest as Isla and Darius responded to unspoken emotional cues, their bond allowing them to navigate the complex layers of meaning that translators missed. "They're responding to our connection," Isla whispered to Darius through their bond. "Their species communicates through collective emotional fields. They recognize what we're doing." Captain Hernandez and Ambassador Varix watched in astonishment as negotiations that had stalled for months suddenly progressed toward resolution. By the end of the day, preliminary agreements had been reached on 3 major points of contention. As the TL Narian delegation departed, their lead representative approached Isla and Darius, mandibles clicking in their version of formal address. "Your harmony speaks truth," the translator interpreted haltingly. "2 voices, 1 song, this we understand." After the diplomatic success, even Ambassador Varix couldn't maintain his opposition. The ritual to break their bond was never mentioned again. Instead, a new protocol was established. Isla and Darius would serve as special envoys for complex diplomatic situations, their unique connection bridging gaps between species that technology alone couldn't span. In their private moments, they continued exploring their bond's evolving nature. What had begun as an accident of genetics and circumstance had transformed into something neither civilization had anticipated, a new kind of connection that transcended species boundaries. "Do you ever regret it?" Darius asked one night as they lay beneath the observatory dome watching distant stars through the transparent ceiling. "Being bound to me." Isla turned in his arms, her luminescent eyes searching his. Through their bond, she sent not words but pure emotion, a love so profound it defied language. "The elders taught us to fear the binding," she said finally, "to see it as fate's trap rather than its gift." Her hand came to rest over his heart, feeling its strong, steady beat that her own had synchronized with. "But what I've found with you isn't a prison. It's possibility, not a curse, but the greatest blessing I could have imagined." Darius kissed her gently, their bond shimmering between them like the starlight overhead. "Then let's show them, both our worlds, what's possible when fear gives way to understanding." 6 months later, they stood together before representatives of both their species, participating in a ceremony that had never been performed across species lines. The formal recognition of their bond, part Aloran soul confirmation ritual, part human marriage ceremony, marked not just their personal union, but a new chapter in human-Aloran relations. As ancient words were spoken and promises exchanged, Isla and Darius stood with their hands and minds linked, their bond a living testament to what could be discovered when different worlds dared to touch. Around them, other human-Aloran pairs watched with newfound hope, couples who had been drawn to each other but held back by fear of the unknown. The path Isla and Darius had pioneered would not be easy for those who followed, but it was now possible. As the ceremony concluded and they sealed their union with a kiss, their bond exploded with shared joy. What had begun as a desperate attempt to maintain distance had become a connection that spanned worlds, proving that sometimes the very thing we fear most becomes the salvation we never knew we needed. In the darkness of space, against impossible odds, they had found each other, and in doing so they had written a new future in the stars.